What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing you a first look at the brand new cards we're going to be receiving in the Lair of Darkness structure deck. The Lair of Darkness structure deck is going to be released in Japan in March, and we're going to be receiving it here in the TCG about mid to late April. So that's not too far off, and the cards that got revealed actually have a lot of potential, so I wanted to cover those in depth. But before we get into that, I want to give a big shout out to my newest patrons, as always. So big shout outs today to John. You are the reason that this channel is growing strong. And if you guys want to help support me in the channel through Patreon, then check out the Patreon link in the description below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. We have a few cards to cover here, so I'm going to cover their effects and kind of give some insight as to how I think, these cards can be best utilized, especially from a competitive standpoint. So starting off with our big boss monster here, Darkus Diabolos, Lord of the Lair. He's a dark level 8 dragon effect monster with 3000 attack and 2000 defense. First thing I noticed with this, you actually can search this with Melody of Awakening Dragon, funny enough. I don't know if that will actually ever come up, or if that's going to be a way the deck wants to utilize to get this card into your hand as quickly as possible, but it just might be, because this card actually has a really insane selection of effects. So the first effect is your opponent cannot tribute this card, also they cannot target it with card effects. So basically, it's a Cosmo Dark Destroyer that can't get kaiju'd by your opponent. The fact that there's a boss monster with a built-in clause that makes it immune to kaijus is a really, really big deal. Now, to be fair, this card, and when we get into the other effects, it doesn't have anything that's oppressive enough that you would immediately want to kaiju over it necessarily, but the fact that you also can't target it means that this is going to be a very, very annoying monster to deal with, because that means you have to either kill it in battle or use non-targeting removal. I guess you could just use a board wipe like Regeki, but it's very annoying to deal with through traditional means. You can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn. If a dark monsters you control is tributed, you can special summon this card from the graveyard if it was there when that monster was tributed, or hand, even if not. Now that is absolutely crazy, because you have to realize that these cards all synergize with kind of the mechanic of tributing themselves to gain effects. And so the fact that this card literally can just special summon itself out onto the field as soon as any of your other dark monsters are tributed means you immediately have a huge 3k body that's very annoying for your opponent to deal with immediately on the board. And then its second effect reads, you can tribute one dark monster. Your opponent places one card from their hand on either the top or bottom of their deck. Now they get to pick the card and they get to decide whether it goes on the top or bottom, but this is hitting your opponent's hand rather than hitting something on the field. So you're able to get some card advantage out of a card like this, but it's a little bit weak because your opponent gets to pick what card they get rid of. They get to pick if they're either going to draw it next turn or place it on the bottom to recycle for a new card during their draw phase, and it doesn't really remove anything on the board. So while this card is insanely powerful for the fact that it's a huge 3k body that's very annoying to deal with, it can rip stuff out of your opponent's hand, and if your opponent's hand is really good, they have to get rid of something. At the very least, you're modulating it so that their draw is going to be the same card that they get, so they're not going to get any additional resources. So it's kind of like paying homage to Erebus back in Monarch format, and I find that really, really interesting. The only thing is Erebus could hit cards anywhere, where this card only hits cards in the hand. But there are a lot of other cool cards I want to discuss here as well that you're going to see kind of how the whole archetype will start to blend together. So this brings us into Lilith, Lady of Lament. Lilith is a dark level 3 fiend effect monster, 2000 attack, 0 defense, which means you can tutor this out via tour guide, and the original attack of this normal summoned card becomes 1000. So basically, if you bring it out through any other means, it'll be 2000, and that's not too difficult to do, but if you just normal summon it, it's going to be 1000, which I guess is fair considering it's a level 3. As a quick effect, you contribute one dark monster, reveal 3 normal traps from your deck, your opponent randomly picks one for you to set to the field, and you shuffle the rest back into your deck, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Now this effect is fucking crazy because this allows you to basically search any normal trap card in the game and add it to your hand. And if you're playing 3 copies of it, you can just pick all 3 copies, very similar to something like Tenacity of the Monarchs, and your opponent has to pick one of them because those are the only options available. So randomly doesn't exactly become random at that point. But the thing is, there is a trap card that in theme with this archetype you're going to be able to search, but that's just the surface level. You can search Bottomless Trap Hole, you can search Mirror Forces, you can search Torrential Tribute, you can search Artifact Sanctum, you can search Evenly Matched with this, and I know that might not be ideal, but the fact that I'm hearing evenly matched and searchable in the same sentence really makes this card very appealing, and I think there's a lot of potential here. That's just scraping the surface. I think this card is incredibly powerful, and it combos with one of the other new cards that this structure deck is going to have as well, once we get to that a little bit later on. The last monster we have to discuss is Ahrima, King of Wickedness. It's a dark level 4 Fiend effect monster, 1700 attack, 0 defense. The effect reads, you can discard this card, add 1 Layer of Darkness from deck to hand. That's the field spell of the archetype. So basically this card is like a Gravekeeper's Commandant that's in theme with the archetype, so pretty cool. Then the other effect reads, you can tribute 1 dark monster, draw 1 card. Or, if a dark monster other than this card was tributed to activate this effect, you can add 1 dark monster with 2000 or more defense from your deck to your hand instead of drawing. Okay, so this is crazy because not only does this allow you to cycle through some of your cards, but basically this is going to trigger Diabolos, making it that you can special summon it out to the field, and then if you tributed a dark monster, you can either opt to draw or you can search out any dark monster with 2000 or more defense. Diabolos happens to have 2000 defense, so that means you have a way to search him out as well. So another way to get to your boss monster seems pretty good. Another thing you can also search with this is something like Dark Lord Zerato, if you happen to fulfill the requirements to special summon him, and if you want to just try to go for game altogether. I think that's really powerful, and it's just a really, really solid card all around. There's a lot of really good targets you can search with this. I'm just mentioning Zerato because that's the first one that comes to mind, but I guess you could go for like Destrudo, Dark Creator, I think falls in that category. There's a lot of good dark monsters with 2000 or higher defense that would synergize with this archetype rather well. Next up is Lair of Darkness, the field spell. So this card reads, face-up monsters on the field become dark attributes. So this is kind of like a zombie world, except for attributes instead of types, and it makes them all dark. Now the next effect reads, once per turn, if you would tribute a monsters to activate a card or effect, you can tribute 1 dark monster your opponent controls as if you controlled it. Now this effect is huge because this can be used in a bunch of different ways. First off, this in tandem with Lilith is crazy because what you can do is you can use the field spell, summon Lilith, use Lilith's effect to tribute 1 of your opponent's monsters to then search for a trap card in your deck to set to your field. You can also use it with the other monster as well to either draw a card, or you can also search for a dark monster with 2000 or more defense as well. So that is an absurdly powerful effect. Another random application is the fact that Infernoids actually get some indirect benefit from this, because the fact you can tribute your opponent's monsters, that means that you can basically turn any Infernoid quick effect to banish a card out of the opponent's graveyard by tributing their own monster to do it. That's insane. So again, I don't know if Infernoids are going to do that, but just something that came to mind as I was reading it. Then the last effect reads, once per turn during the end phase, special summon to the turn player's field in defense position as many shadow tokens, which are Dark Fiend level 3 with 1000 attack and defense, as possible, up to the number of monsters that were tributed while this card was face up on the field. So why this is good is, going back to the Lilith example, so let's say you tributed a monster on your opponent's field, you then got to search a trap from your deck. Let's say that's all you did for the turn. Lair of Darkness will trigger in the end phase, and you're going to get 1 token. Well, that means that you can use Lilith's effect again on your opponent's turn, and if they don't summon a monster at all, you can just tribute that Darkness token and trigger Lilith's effect to get another trap card out of your deck for the following turn. But the fact that Lair of Darkness allows you to tribute your opponent's monsters means that you have the ability to basically turn all of these tribute effects into spot removal, and I think that's extremely powerful when you look at what this deck is capable of doing. That means you're going to be able to summon Diabolos out on the field during your turn, as well as your opponent's turn as well, if that's when a monster was tributed, and that's really, really cool. Now, last but not least, we have the trap card, Grinning Grave Virus. It looks so cute, but this is one of the craziest virus cards I think we've had, so I just want to go ahead and read it. So, tribute 1 dark monster with 3,000 or less attack. Your opponent destroys 1 card from their hand and or deck for every 500 attack the tributed monster had. Also, if a dark monster with 2,000 or more attack was tributed to activate this card, check all cards your opponent draws until the end of their 3rd turn after activation. Destroy all monsters among them. Also, cards sent to the graveyard because they were destroyed by this card's effect cannot activate their effects during the turn they were destroyed. Now, this is crazy because basically any monster that's going to get sent to the graveyard off of this isn't going to get its effect the turn that it's sent. So basically, take for instance like Burning Abyss monsters. Those cards would trigger as soon as they hit the graveyard. Well, with this card, it's not going to be the case because this card's going to prevent that activation. Now, the downside is if your opponent is sending cards that don't necessarily need a trigger on hitting the grave, let's say something like Fairy Tale Snow that can be used at any time, Snow can just be used on the next turn to kind of circumvent and work around this card. Also, the thing that I don't like about this card, your opponent can destroy any card from their hand or deck, so they don't have to send monsters. And I think that's a big downside because if they want to keep their monsters, they could just send 6 spell or trap cards if you were to tribute a monster with 3,000 attack, for instance, and then that way they get to keep all their monsters. And sometimes there's spell or traps, like say for instance like with Spiral, they actually want to have them in the graveyard because it gives them more options for extenders having them in the graveyard rather than in their deck or in their hand. So this card can backfire depending on the matchup, but at the same time, it's also really cool that you get to not only see what cards they have, but you're destroying monsters and negating their grave effects the turn they're sent to the graveyard as a whole. So, guys, that's it for the first look at the Lair of Darkness structure deck cards. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about these cards as a whole. I think there's a lot of potential here because I really just wanted to quickly go over these, and, you know, with all the dark support that really exists in this game, I mean, there's Allure of Darkness, Dark Grepher is looking extremely powerful in this deck because it's able to send Diabolos to the graveyard and just kind of manipulate a bunch of cards. You've got stuff like Destiny Hero Malicious by chance, which you can get that as free tribute fodder just as much as you want. It happens to be a tribute monster if you really need it, and then you can play stuff like Destiny Draw. Then there's also stuff like Recurring Nightmare. Lilith and the other monster have 0 defense that helps you recur your resources if you need to. I think there's a lot of hidden potential here, and I'm really curious to see how this deck pans out. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, and if you found this video helpful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.